What is up, YouTube? Today I'm going to teach you how to tattoo a neo-traditional tattoo. In this video, I'm going to show you and break down everything you need to know to line a neo-traditional tattoo. If you're new to this channel, I'm Brandon from Tattooing 101, and make sure you like and subscribe down below to keep up to date on all the content that I make each week for you guys.
Okay, before we start, we're just setting up our station, so I know that we are using 6 colors, so I'm just putting my ink caps into my Vaseline just so they stick. So if you don't have Vaseline on your ink caps, they're going to move around, they could spill. So I always put a little dab of Vaseline before putting down my ink caps so they stick exactly where I want them to. Okay, we got 6 down there. And another thing you want to make sure that you have is a rinse cup. So anytime you're doing colored designs, you want a rinse cup so you can wash your needles out whenever you are tattooing. So that is another super important part to this design, having your rinse cup to be able to keep your cartridges nice and clean throughout the tattoo. Awesome. So with this design, you could see I created some flow with it. So this is really important when it comes to tattooing, being able to create this flow along with your tattoos. So you could see that it comes up this way and then it comes back around, having the flames come this way. So this would look really great on an arm or something like that. So anytime you are drawing for tattooing, making sure that you're keeping with like these S shapes, things like that flow with the body will help you out a ton in your career. Okay, now we could get into the actual tattoo. So we're going to start out with just black. I'm going to pour the colors in later. So for right now, we're just going to work with our black, getting our lining down, and then we can move on. What I'm going to do is actually pour my red because, as you guys remember, we are doing this flame outlined in red. So we're going to get our red ink poured, making sure you shake up your bottles, especially if you're not tattooing every single day. Even if you are tattooing every day, make sure you shake your bottles because it could separate and cause for your ink to not be saturated enough for it to go into the skin correctly. So make sure you're shaking up your bottles. If you haven't tattooed in a month, make sure you're really shaking them up or it'll cause a lot of issues and you won't really know what's going on. Okay, so let's get into the actual tattooing part of this course. So before we actually start tattooing, what we always want to do is making sure we're checking the needle depth. So as you can see here, that is how far I let my needle hang out. That is, for me, if you're running on the tube, you won't want it to hang out that far. So it depends on the way you're tattooing. If you're running on the needle, that is fine if you know the appropriate depth you're trying to get to. The problem with hanging it out is if you're just starting to learn, the problem is you'll go too deep and it'll go straight through this actual fake skin because it's not super thick. So doing it that way, if you want to run in your tube, that's perfectly fine. It's a lot harder to keep everything nice and clean on a stencil because it kind of smears everywhere. But tattoo whatever way you feel comfortable with. You could pick up different steps. You could run on the tip of the needle eventually in your career. So just do whatever's comfortable for you and learn from there. So we are starting down on the bottom because we don't want our stencil to rub away. You always want to start on the bottom of your tattoo no matter what you're doing. And today I'm using my Cheyenne Soul Nova Unlimited. It is a wireless machine and it is a 4.0 stroke. This is going to help me be able to do all these colors in here appropriately. If you have a machine with a shorter stroke, that's fine. Just use whatever you have, but just know it could be a little bit harder putting in those colors with a shorter stroke machine. Okay, let's get into the tattoo. So whenever you are lining, you want to practice about keeping steady the whole time. You want to make sure that your machine is at an angle and just keeping a steady pace the whole way through the tattoo. You don't want to speed up in some areas because that'll lead to inconsistencies in your lines. So when you start, just take a deep breath, relax, and do your line. And remember, we're just doing the lines for the bottle, we're not going over the actual smoke. That's going to be done with shading, so there's not going to be any lines to it at all. Make sure before you start tattooing that you are putting a thin layer of Vaseline over everything. What that does is help you be able to pull up that ink without it smearing everywhere, and also just helps the needle go into the fake skin a little bit better. Okay, I just pulled a really long line right there, and like I said earlier, just do what you feel comfortable. If you aren't comfortable doing a long line like that, all you have to do is kind of whip out the area, which I'll show you here in a second. So right here, what I'm going to do is just whip out that line. What that does is doesn't leave a hard stop on that right there. So what you got to do is come back a little bit on this line where you started to whip out, and then pick up from there. So that leaves a consistent line the whole way through. If you don't have the ability to pull a super long straight line at this point of your career, that's one way to be able to do it and have it look clean while stopping halfway in the middle of it, in the line. And I do tattoo pretty fast, so if you aren't able to keep up, all you have to do is pause the video, be able to do that one area that you just watched, and then just go back and pick up wherever you left off. I tattoo a lot faster than most tattoo artists, so feel free to pause the video, take your time, and then just catch back up whenever you can. And you can see so far we're doing a great job keeping that stencil. It's not rubbing off, so that's why it's so important to let it dry. You can see that I'm staying consistent and steady the whole way through. Now that we've gone through most of the big areas where the lines need to be, we're going to switch over to our small 7 liner. What we're going to do is go back and do some of the detailed areas. Okay, let's start off with the actual fire. So what we're going to do is go through here. We're just putting some Vaseline down and then dipping in our red, letting it fill up in the tube as you can clearly see, and just going through and do our line work for it. Whenever you are doing things with flow like flames or like circles, things like that, you kind of want to get an anchor point. So what I'm doing is using my hand as an anchor point. You could, pivot with holding your fingers like this and doing it like this, or using these 2 fingers as guideline to pivot that way. Whatever you want to do, you want to make sure that you're having a pivot point to be able to do these clean, areas that have some flow to them.
So this is exactly what we break down in the 10-day seminar. In the 10-day seminar, me and Nathan go through showing you how to tattoo from stencil to complete tattoo. The best thing about this is you get to learn from 2 different artists. We tattoo dramatically different, so you could pick up on little tricks from both of us to implement in the way that you tattoo.
Whenever you are drawing tattoos and trying to get flow, smoke and flames are a great way to do that, because even in nature there's no exact way for them to go. So you could just, fill in areas with it or make it just look super cool just by adding some flames or some smoke to a design. Awesome, so now that we're done with the lining in red, we're going to dip in our rinse cup. And once you do, all you got to do is dip it in there and then just shake it around. Then when you're done with that, you could just use your paper towel and just dab it like that. That'll get all the residual water out of the actual cartridge. Now we're going to dip into our black and make sure we do the tag. Okay, we're going to dip into our water again because we don't want any of that ink to dry. We're going to be using this liner later, so making sure that everything's cleaned out before moving on to your shading or anything like that will help you out in the further along in the tattoo. Okay, we're going to clean it up, and all I use whenever I'm cleaning it up my fake skins is just some Vaseline. We're going to try to stay away from down here because we don't want that stencil to rub off, so just cleaning up the top part just so we don't make a mess.
If you have found this video helpful and want more content like this, I highly recommend you pick up our 10-day seminar, and I'll leave a link down below just for you.